everyone. Welcome to the afternoon session of Nabanna Art Week Day 3. Thank you for being here with us. In our upcoming session, we'll hear Sanchayan Ghosh, pedagogue, scenographer, and installation artist, creating a discursive space in memory of Mrinal Sen in conversation with filmmaker Supriyo Sen on the legacy of Mrinal Sen. Sanchayan Ghosh is a scenographer, installation artist, and pedagogue. He currently works as an associate professor in the Department of Painting at Visva Bharati University, Santiniketan. He has explored workshop-based collective community dialogues and worked closely with different theatre forms from all over India. He participated in the first Kochi-Muziris Biennale in 2012 and Documenta 40 in 2017. He has been associated with different pedagogy projects with NSD, FICA, and 5 million incidents of Max Mueller Kolkata. Further, he co-curated the second session of Under the Mango Tree in Santiniketan in 2020 and is one of the curators of the 2018 Kochi Muziris Students Biennale, Kochi. Supriyo Sen is an independent filmmaker who has directed documentaries like Way Back Home, Hope Dies Last in War, Wagha, and Swimming Through the Darkness. He has won 40 international awards for his films as well as 4 national awards, including the President's Gold Medal for the Best Documentary of the Year for Hope Dies Last in War. His debut fiction film, Tamra Blues, won several awards, including Filmfare Award for Best Bengali Film Debut, Director in Bengali Cinema, and Chidananda Raju, the Memorial Award for Best Debut Director in Indian Language Cinema. Supriyo has served as a juror in several international film festivals and has taken workshops and master classes in many countries. We will start the session.
Thank you for the introduction, and it's really, I'm feeling very great that Supriyo is with us to be part of this session. So initially, this whole idea of this space around Mrinal Sen came up with this conversation with Anjum Katiyal, who sort of approached me that if kind of a method can be generated to celebrate the centenary year of Mrinal Sen, and also how the conversation can also be initiated in a discursive space also, and not just only conversation on Mrinal Sen's work. So I thought it's a very interesting opportunity to also engage with Mrinal Sen's practice from a visual art practice perspective, because many of the time in visual arts we do not really look at the other disciplines or parallelly what are the different other practices going on. So it would be important to also engage with this idea of avant-garde or idea of engagement in the social sphere through the practice of Mrinal Sen and how he has engaged with the language of film. And also in visual art we are also in recent times engaging with practices like video art or performance spaces or installation-based practices, which comes up from engaging with space as a language. So I sort of share this idea with some of my students, like Hiraj is here, Stenzi is here, Asif is here. They're all master students. Some of them are here, some of them are engaged in some other workshops going on. So 4 of them are present here today. So initially we sort of saw some of the films of Mrinal Sen, and then they also went in and did some research on his practice. And we were also trying to look at the time frame in which Mrinal Sen is working, especially from 40s to late 90s, and his last film is 2002, Amount One. So, and it's a very important phase, I think, in visual art practice also, all over the world. And I think it is the time also where these divides between disciplinary practices are also collapsing, especially 50s, 60s, 70s, where we see a lot of different methods in which to engage it in a more holistic way. So those parallel movements within the film practice and also within the visual art practice, we try to discuss. So what came up is some of those contents and some of the contexts which we could sort of generate a conversation around. Through this film, go back to the visual art language. So some of the elements that came up was about agitprop, then about the idea of alienation, Christian methodology, and also we talked about the whole politics, art as a political language, not just politics in a sense, but the language of art as a political tool. And that was also very important, I think, this time. And this idea of the collage and the montage, which are parallelly happening in the film and the visual language. And then also, while looking at Mrinal Sen's practice, also we found that his journey was almost like traversing through the time, the way technology is changing. And through the change of technologies, how the sensibilities are changing also in terms of human relationships.
Yeah.
So quickly, I would start, in a sense, this was like the framework in which we looked at this space.
So, I mean, we can interact among each other about like how this particular filmmaker shaped up the language of Bengali or Indian cinema, and also as individual artists, how we have been like inspired by his works and also his politics, which has been very predominant and explicit. I mean, and he never shied away from expressing his political standpoint and his ideology, confusion, everything. He has been that way. He has been a very open director. I mean, he always shared the kind of practices and the kind of political dialectics and dilemma he has been going through. He always shared it with the audience through his film, and also we have the opportunity to interact with him personally. So he has been very open about it. So that is I mean, that way he was a great teacher for all of us. For me, the beginning was, see, I started watching Mrinal Sen as as a film noir. So I didn't have any kind of political orientation or anything else to judge a filmmaker like. It was just simply watching his movies. But what I found important, I mean, like each engaged me with his film is the first and foremost is I always came to know, or I mean get the kind of vision and analysis of contemporary past through his film. Like when we started watching movies, the Nakshabari movement was maybe a decade old or something. So there have not been many writings, essays, evaluations about the movement, especially in cinema. But films like Interview and Kolkata or Padate is directly took me to that very important part of our contemporary past. So that was the most important, I mean, kind of engagement with his film I found as a filmmaker.
I think that is another very significant part, that how he historicizes his time, necessarily not from a historical perspective, but also in what is happening around him, and put it into perspective in that sense. And which I think is a very interesting language, which I think today's practitioners are also very much in how to engage with documentary as a tool, which is because documentary as a practice has a kind of a colonial baggage, that it comes from that kind of anthropological truth, that how it engages with the space.
And also in our country, the whole history of documentary filmmaking was, I mean, the pattern was set by the British rulers.
Right.
It was all about, mostly about propaganda and just so-called objective reporting. There is no space for intervention and subjectivity. So yeah, I mean,
In that context, I mean, how he digs inside the documentary but also comes out of it and opens it up into the larger discourse. And so his films have this quality, I think, becomes very significant in this time, that in the age of internet, in the age of digitization, an archive is like a huge, as this whole space is based on the digital archive that we see. I mean, it's not something that is. So we first thing that we decided that not to show films in that space. We will not show clips or videos.
Tell me something. Which are the gateways through you wanted to, get into Mrinal Sen?
Right. That's very important. I think we should talk about it. Because one was the important part was to go into YouTube simply and write the film's names and what it available with all the logos and all we get with all the disruptions of which is kind of naturalized. What the language what Mrinal Sen is using in his films, it has almost become a kind of naturalized format in YouTube. You see a movie and suddenly you see an ad coming.
Directly and interjection.
It has become part of the whole system. But the other platform which I should mention in this discussion is Padma. It's an online archive that has come up on film archiving, and not necessarily film, it's also video archiving, which is run by two visual artists, Ashok Sukumaran and Saina. And they are basically, they have archived 63,000 films. And this whole segment of the film that we could see comes from indiancinema.ma. So there you can go and see the films, which some of them are copyrighted, some of them are not copyrighted. And then you can go and look at clips, you can annotate it, you can put your own comments. So you can use that whole archive, the online archive, as a kind of pedagogic support, where you can constantly go back and forth. So that, I think, the students who worked with us got access to that system and to look at clips, how the things are moving, how the disruptions are being introduced, or different kinds of cuts are being done in the film. So that helped us a lot to select things, because each of the students, they followed individual films. And from there they selected certain clips which we brought in together into the space, and then try to create content which starts like an IPTS segment, and segment where Mrigaya and this whole engagement with the natural landscape and the local community comes in, or this whole directly political engagement, or this like alienation process and isolating individuals in the whole content. So that's how kind of a transforming very dialectic life also through practice. That how his practice has been about dialectics, and not necessarily holding on to one method of realism and following it all through. So I would like to know from you also that how his methods of this kind of operations between found footage or recorded documents, and then creating a fiction parallelly with it, weaving another story around it. How do you see that practice introduced?
I think it is very interesting. If you see the journey of Mrinal Sen as a filmmaker, he also admitted later in his interviews that, when he started, he said he didn't know anything about it, because he was a self-taught filmmaker, and most of the filmmakers of those days were self-taught filmmakers. But so they were very open, also very open to learn from practicing it. Like, I can understand this process because I am also a self-taught filmmaker. So in the beginning, first few films were just learning the craft of the filmmaking. So, and gradually, if we see the journey of his films and as an individual, it was like shaping up in a very experimental way, like the way he is incorporating different materials and different form. Like we see in the 70s, I mean, if you forget about the Ek Akashe Niche, that phase, Baishistam is very decent cinema, but that is not the Mrinal Sen we found in the 70s. So, and during this phase, and also very importantly, his language was also inspired by the kind of situation he has to work in. The kind of statement he wanted to make through his film and the kind of financial support he would have expected from the society. So that also shaped the language of his films. So initially, of course, this kind of direct cinema approach, cinema verite, non-narrative, non-linear structure, this helps independent filmmakers to explore their kind of politics or independent ideology. It offers more flexibility because as a medium, film is very much overburdened by capital. So how intelligently you deal the presence of capital is also very important. How you shape up your expression. So initially it was very interesting, and during those days, I think 70s was very turbulent. It was not a time for linear narrative or like it was all about questioning existing social pattern all over the world. So as a filmmaker, he just I believe was very much inspired by that particular time and whatever possible elements had around him, he tried to explore every element through his cinema. And I believe till that time, his films has been more experimental films in India. I mean, no one before, maybe later there have been many filmmakers we have seen exploring the medium of art and taking inspiration from different kind of cinematic practices. But till then, I believe it was only Mrinal Sen who took inspiration from documentary, cinema verite, direct cinema, and then all this Brechtian theory, which he broke the several times. He broke the fourth one, and directly addressing the audience through the form of cinema, which is it exists in our country, but not in cinema, in theaters, in Jatra.
So that is also another very interesting part of his filmmaking, which I thought of while seeing his movies, that there are certain tools which were more associated with visual art, like the whole practice of the clusters in the 50s, where they are doing this kind of editing-based film which is based on the tools of editing, or which is based on the time-based process, where camera is almost looked upon like a ritualistic tool, like it is following something, or even later on, like there are artists like Vito Acconci in US who is like taking the camera and following one person, and he is following till the point that person looks back and resisted, or who takes him back to his house. So this whole idea of following, I think it's not that he has been in interaction, but there is this element of following individuals in Mrinal Sen's film that he's not necessarily trying to, and he also talks about in this interview that I'm not telling a grand narrative.
No, not at all.
But trying to find this kind of very personal spaces through the individuals, through the characters I'm trying to read at time, and the social relationships, which I think takes his film just not being only fictional, but sometimes very autobiographical.
Yes. And also, I mean, in those, in that phase, his characters are very representative. They represent something else. Not even the characters. some history, some ideology. So it's very, the characters are very representative. I mean, it's representation rather than like you see characters of made of flesh and blood, which you see in like grand narrative, epics, where each and every character is developed. Whether in this phase we can see it's more about representation, representing certain ideology, time, conflict, dilemma. So,
in terms of his language, in terms of how do you see the kind of shifts that he is making in his practice, and how, like, what is his political, ideological engagement through which he is looking at practice also, but also the kind of tools that are coming in filmmaking. How do you think that those are impacting his philosophical position also, especially the coming of the the using communication systems or using different kinds of human relationships through new technology or new innovations that are coming, and looking at that possibility also as a filmmaker. How much that has, because when we look at avant-garde as a content, most of the time it is associated to certain kind of new technology or kind of a disruptive methodology where you want to change something or you want to sort of appreciate the time in which the whole experience of individual lifestyle is changing. Like the whole shift from an agrarian to an industrial to a more digitized way of lifestyle. So how do you think that shift impacted his practice?
see, one thing was constant about him is that his belief in social change, in revolution. Maybe, I mean, the shape of revolution in his mind changed later, post-Berlin Wall reality changed him quite a lot. I mean, his language also changed. The kind of content he has chosen post-Berlin Wall was different. But still, this was constant. And we know his popular statement about his, practices is that I am a private Marxist. So he remained a private Marxist, a Marxist, because social change and he has a strong belief in social revolution and social change. So that is constant. But in terms of language, it was very, very dynamic. Like, as we discussed that in the 70s, when there is a need to intervene, he did that. I mean, with every available artistic form and practices, which is not regular in storytelling format of filmmaking, but he borrowed it from, documentary, he borrowed it from theater, and tried to shape up a new language, and which worked very well, I believe. His films are internationally acclaimed also, then gradually we see he get into another phase of his life when he makes cinemas like Kharij, Agni Pratidin, Akale Shandani, where I believe his aesthetics become more stronger. He has control over several elements of art, and he tried to explore with that. But in terms of narrative, he's still questioning. He's still, and especially in this phase, he was questioning himself, I believe, because all his characters were like middle class citizens who were going through. On the one hand, they have the big dream of social change and revolution. On the other hand, they have this, Bangla যেটাকে বলে পিছুটান. এবং the middle class is like placed in a certain position in the social order, যেখানে সে যখন যেদিকে সুবিধা সে শিফট করে যেতে পারে. উনি এই জায়গাটাই যে এই যে সোশ্যাল রাপচারটা এটার মধ্যে ঢুকে, it was like throwing light within himself which is a very self-reflexive practice. I mean, so this phase is very important for that only, not only about about the city of Calcutta, because all these films are also about the city of Calcutta, the women. I mean, they are the most important, including, many of them, and Mrinal Sen has been the most important feminist filmmaker of that time. But I think this phase was about soul searching, because all over the world, we have found that we discuss about dictatorship of proletariat, but end of the day you see that it is actually the whole show of revolution in politics was always run by the middle class. So maybe that was the reason when we see so much departure from that, and like what happened in Russia and Czechoslovakia and Germany is related to this thing. So this phase was, I believe this phase was also very important. And then we have this post-Berlin quest, which is distinctly different from his previous journey. Am I distracted from it?
We are looking at different angles.
Yeah.
I think he's one filmmaker, plus, as we also earlier talking about, that there's so many different kind of way of filmmaking, and his genres have also evolved so much that it's difficult to only track him in one trajectory, and which itself
I believe he's the only filmmaker who has a huge body of work and completely different. Several phases, and completely the films are, in terms of look and the storytelling, everything is so different from one phase to.
So I was also wondering that since you are also a very hardcore documentary filmmaker and also working within fiction, this whole journey of participation, because he also deals with this whole idea, because in one of his interviews he's talking about that, I know that I cannot change their life, I cannot change those people, but I'm also responsible, and I'm also documenting them. And like he was talking about this small girl in this, where he makes a kind of friendship with that girl, and then he has to leave her when the shooting is over. They have to rush from because that's the point where the village narrative and the 1942 narrative collapsed at a certain point, that it's the same story. Now this whole dilemma and this whole position of the artist also, that you come from the outside, you engage with a certain situation, and especially in today's time when we are talking about reclaiming of spaces beyond that colonial framework, which also tried to follow those different kind of compartmentalization things, and that this whole idea of reclaiming, how do you look at Mrinal Sen as a practitioner who is constantly problematizing this whole situation, that I am trying to represent somebody, but I am also trying to engage with it, with the content or the body or the people directly in certain level, and also making it a point where I can go away. And this whole notion of that, whether I am exploiting or not, whether I am exploiting the body or not, what I am observing, whether I am creating a certain kind of making another object with it or not. And I think that dilemma and that question, that still becomes a very important notion for, I think, artists, at least artists on the art practice level also, that how do you engage with, suddenly you go to a village and you start drawing, or suddenly you go to the village and nowadays we are displaying arts in the village, thinking who are the people living there and whose house on which I am displaying my work, but it's more like connecting to the whole context in there. So for filmmaking, maybe it is that the tools is so vividly present in between the observer and the observer, that the tool itself creates this dynamics. Okay, it's a camera and you are observing, you are making something out of it. So there is a technological interest or inquisitiveness on both sides. But still, that whole idea of engaging on one level as a political consciousness and engaging physically
as human being.
as human being with subjects or people that is around you. How we can sort of re-engage with that too?
See, it's difficult. For the artist, it's always the society is the source of his inspiration, or whatever. Everything is the society, and you have to travel. You have to go across the classes also. You as an artist, you cannot belong to your own class and practice art. The horizon should be, much broader than where you belong to, where you started from. So it has been always very difficult, and it always poses ethical questions to you. And it is within yourself you have to resolve it. There is no definite answer for it. Like I was listening to his interviews, as Mrinal Sen tried to explain it, like showing poor people, poverty in his film. He claimed that it's different from showing poverty beautifully. Maybe he was referring to which is true. His poverty is very good, very direct. Like if we see the first episode of Kolkata, and there is no glamour there. So so maybe this way he tried to answer the ethical question. So as a filmmaker, I can tell you, we always have this when we like a paratroop in other people's reality and life, which is necessary also. Because these are the very, regular, random, question we always face. Did you go back and show the film to them? It's a very valid question. But the answer to the question is related to many other issues. It is not only about just showing once or twice or taking permission. It's more than that. Of course, Mrinal Sen believed that, earlier in his character, he believed that film can bring in revolution, film can change society, and later he said no. So it happened with all of us. But if you don't believe that cinema cannot change society, you cannot take up such a huge responsibility to make film, socially concerned film. So sometimes it's like you are teaching yourself, so it's a very complicated situation, and you always morally, ethically should go on questioning yourself. And I don't believe there is a definite answer, but through this process you might reach to a better position to handle reality, which is very complicated. You keep on questioning yourself. You cannot, put it under the carpet, because this question will keep on haunting you. Whether you should do this, whether you should intervene in people's life, and what you are doing with the end product. Like it is always said, you make films about poor people and it goes to festival, you got an awards, your lifestyle, changes, and so these are very regular question which is thrown to the artist, especially filmmakers. But it's a process, I believe, and he also, he honestly throughout his life, he addressed this question, and not only through his film. See, we have the great privilege, that way he's a great human being, forget about he's a great master. He was so accessible, Mrinal Sen. We could always go to him, meet him, see, after making, 20 years of making Khanda, we were having a kind of interactive session with Mrinal Sen, and one of this young fellow who has talked, at that age you think you have learned anything, you know everything. So he stood up and said, okay, there was a huge problem in this shot in Khanda. He was that kind of a person, he used to say, yeah, I know that. So he was very accessible. So, as I said, not only through his films, through all kind of interactions and discourse writings, he kept on, discussing about his shifting positions, which is very honest.
So the other aspect which I thought was something about his visual language, the way he sort of brings in these different kinds of spaces in the film, where sometimes it is very coming from kind of ways in which he would erase everything and just focus on one portrait, and suddenly you will be bombarded with footages of different kinds of things, and then suddenly it's a fiction that he's observing, he's following, and moving into that language. So how do, in terms of, especially there is this whole debate that is there any avant-garde at all which happened in Indian art practice? And there are people who have tried to look at tools as disruptions, or tools as politically questioning things, but whether the avant-garde, whether we can call this as an avant-garde, or it is more of another form that it has taken up, where different kinds of influences are coming, but then it is somewhere being transformed into the context in which you are operating, or in the landscape. Or is it, do you think that there is a kind of connectivity that we can make with the larger practice that was happening in this time?
See, in reference to Mrinal Sen, I think, as we discussed already, that all these practices came from the urge to address that,
the political
situation and the time. It was very disturbing. So it was like instant reaction to the reality, surrounding reality, the reality around you. How far it is a very conscious art practice, I don't know. I would rather love to believe that it emerged from that if you, like as a film theoretician, after having some distance from that time and his practices, and if you try to deconstruct his work as like avant-garde, and like it is easier for a theoretician, but as an artist going through that particular time and trying to react to the situation is very, very spontaneous and political. How much it is like conscious artistic practice, and that I don't believe, because as a filmmaker I also react to situations very spontaneously. It's not easy in filmmaking to have too much of preconceived, apply too much of preconceived aesthetics elements in.
I think I was remembering this whole interview where you say about that I write a script, but necessarily I do not follow the script when I'm in the film. And it's always in that moment, who is the character?
Yeah.
Looking at the actor only, and have a conversation with the actor, and then you improvise, and the whole script changes a bit.
Yeah, that way he is more of a documentary filmmaker than a fiction filmmaker. He used to have certain ideas about a situation, then he used to give a lot of freedom and freehand to his actors. And to that extent, in many of his films, we see that his actors, he's using the name of the actors as characters. Like in Akale Shandani and which are the other films, Interview. So, Ranjit. Akale Shandani is like, so that was very much documentary. Even if you see Akale Shandani, I think half the narrative evolved while making the film, which is a regular case in documentary cinema. Like we like certain ideas, we just delve into it. We don't know what would be the destination. Only certain belief and notion push us to that huge kind of space of uncertainty. And then you come up with something, sometimes it is something else. I mean, so it's a very uncertain. So he delved into that area of uncertainty, which is very much, I mean, a part of documentary practices.
Yes, I think if there is any specific question or any observations around these areas which we are just trying to explore around Mrinal Sen, if there is any specific question, or I would like to also request some of the students who participated in this research, that if they encountered any specific question or anything that they felt while looking at his film, you found certain things that is very interesting, or you want to explore that way of thinking or method of making. Hindi, Bangla, could be language.
हाँ सब किस जो
For me, like, I'm interested when I say that Akale Sandhane is like more like he himself is questioning himself, like how his process is and how he like when he like you already discussed about like when we go somewhere or like when site specific work or somewhere, like how we are engaged with the people or engaged with the subject, then how like the process is like और कैसे आगे जाते हैं और सब चीजों को वो बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग लगा। वो हम अपने साथ कनेक्ट कर सकते हैं, जैसे आपके साइट स्पेसिफिक काम या कम्युनिटी के आर्ट में हम कैसे देखते हैं उस चीज़ को, या फिर हम डोमिनेट कर रहे हैं अपने टूल्स को लेके, या फिर हम कुछ पार्टिसिपेटरी मूड में जाके कुछ एंगेज के कुछ और वहाँ से भी सीख रहे हैं। तो वो मेरे लिए बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग। और मैं वो क्वेश्चन को लेके ट्राई कर रहा था कि ओके तो उसका मुद्दा और प्रोसेस मेथोडोलॉजी कैसा है, उसको देखने।
See, in documentary practices, it is possible to have this kind of participatory, because documentary is always evolving, always shaping up. It is not like fiction. You have a very structured gateway to get into the world of storytelling, and which is, I mean, almost a closed space. But where in documentaries, it's very open. So, and he practiced, as I mentioned, Akale Sandhane. It's, I believe, half the film was, I mean, developed during the shooting of the film. So, how you incorporate the narratives which was not even existed in your mindset, how you incorporate that kind of interaction and the experiences of it. It is very participative. So,
Any other?
Could you share some little bit about the process of creating this space, like you did in the beginning, but in you and probably
I think they can
the
talk a
students
little bit.
can also talk.
Bolo, let's say how it.
What was the idea of
When
pasting?
I'm also interested to know, like she was asking that when you started, did you have an idea of Mrinal Sen? That film করতেন বা he was associated with something in your mind, and then did that get challenged or did that get developed further process in মধ্যে?
पहले तो आइडिया नहीं था, इट्स लाइक मोर लाइक रिसर्च ओरिएंटेड आर्ट प्रैक्टिस जैसे पहले हम उसको मूवी देखने चालू किए, जस्ट रैंडम मूवीज फिर टाइमलाइन देख के उसके बाद हमने ओके उसको मूवी एक नरेशन का एक पार्ट है, उसके साथ और क्या क्या मेथड यूज कर रहे हैं और क्या क्या ऐसे एलिमेंट यूज कर रहे हैं और होल थिंग लाइक वो तो वहाँ से शुरू हुआ कि ओके हम भी अगर ये काम करेंगे तो उसमें से पहला क्या क्या चीज़ें आ सकते हैं उसमें से, जैसे पॉलिटिकल साइको कैसे लिखता था, सोशल एस्पेक्ट को लेके या फिर इंडिविजुअल एस्पेक्ट को लेके वो कैसे एनकाउंटर कर रहा था। तो हम सोच रहे थे कि हम उस चीज़ को कैसे एक एक्सपीरियंस में ला सकते हैं, तो हमारा भी स्टार्टिंग वैसा ही हुआ था।
Also, I have a question. I mean, why so much black and white, and only the other color I see is red? It's here, it's there. Just a
I
question.
think the red one was more of this looking at this whole, because somewhere I found that this whole idea of the red inside, I mean, what as ideologue he is a sustained form, but then it is also changing.
Yes.
So that was a kind of a layer that we added, in a sense that it's kind of a red line which is moving and taking different shapes according to the architecture and then sometimes. But in terms of the documents, I think many of the films which we could see
It's black and white.
mostly black and white, only Antarin and I think what else? This other film Telugu. Mriga was
black
color.
and white.
No, it was color, but we could not print it.
Okay.
So we moved into the later phases, but I think most of the films that we saw was 60s to 80s, or late 70s, late 80s, and then some of the selected films later on.
So I have an observation like this whole thing is like it's turned into a dark room with red light, where the negative is being developed, and like the process is there on the range, and
I mean that can you can have that because there is also white light spot.
Yeah.
There are also the shadows that were covering things and also revealing things. No, I think that's another aspect of Mrinal Sen. I think he almost becomes like an investigator, but also at times he opens up the dialogue of the investigation. It's not just with one eye or one point of view looking at the film subject. It brings in a lot of other, especially in that interview sequence, in a sense, where this man is looking for the coat, the blazer, he could not get it. So he's searching in the city, then suddenly you find advertisements of blazers coming in the shot, and then suddenly some different other commercials comes into the shot. So he brings in the city through the individual. His